Have you ever walked away from a conversation with your adult child and thought, why does it feel like they hate me but still need me? Maybe they snapped at you for something small. Maybe they ignored your calls for days, only to suddenly need your help with something, money, childcare, or even just a place to vent. It's confusing. It's painful. And if you're over 60, maybe even retired or slowing down a bit, it can feel downright exhausting. You gave them your best years. You worked hard to provide. You picked them up when they fell. You were there for every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every graduation. And now, it feels like you're walking on eggshells in your own family. You might be wondering if you're imagining things. Or maybe you've been told you're being too sensitive, maybe even by your own child. But let me reassure you right now, if your adult child's behavior leaves you feeling blamed, confused, or chronically unappreciated, you're not alone, and it's not your fault. Today, we're going to talk about something most people don't want to say out loud, what it means to have an adult child who constantly pushes you away, yet still refuses to truly let you go. They may act as if they despise you, criticize you, or distance themselves emotionally, but at the same time, they keep pulling you back into their world. We're going to get to the heart of why that happens. And most importantly, we'll talk about what you can do to regain peace and strength in your own life, because you deserve that now more than ever. Let's start by looking at one of the deepest and most exhausting dynamics in this kind of relationship: the need for contrast. Some adult children need someone close to them to play the role of the problem. Someone they can argue with, blame, or criticize so they can feel like the one who is right, capable, or superior. They build their sense of identity by positioning themselves against someone else. They feel important when they have someone to correct. They feel clever when they can make another person seem wrong. They feel powerful when they diminish others, especially the people who are safest to target. And here is the painful truth. That person is often the parent. You may be kind, giving, thoughtful, full of care. But in this dynamic, your kindness becomes the backdrop against which they elevate themselves. If you disagree, you are labeled controlling. If you express your feelings, you are called difficult or toxic. If you stay silent, they accuse you of not caring at all. No matter what you do, you lose, because the role has already been assigned to you, and it has nothing to do with who you truly are. And most often, the role they need you to play is the villain. Why? Because without someone to push against, they don't know who they are. It's like a mirror. They need you to reflect back an image that makes them feel superior. If you apologize first, they feel righteous. If you defend yourself, they feel attacked, giving them permission to lash out again. It becomes a cycle. You try to smooth things over, and they find new ways to pick at you. It can feel personal, and it is. But it's also a pattern, one rooted in insecurity, not truth. Now let me be clear. This isn't about blame. If your child is treating you this way, it doesn't mean you failed as a parent. Far from it. In fact, you likely gave everything you had. You supported them. You sacrificed. You forgave more than you ever thought possible. But for someone with these patterns of behavior, a parent's love is never enough. What they are really seeking isn't love. It's control. It's constant validation. It's having someone to blame when life doesn't go the way they want. And yet, despite all of this mistreatment, they still won't let you go. You might assume that someone who criticizes you endlessly would eventually walk away, cut contact, and build a life elsewhere. But that rarely happens. Instead, they keep coming back. They send mixed messages. Distant one day, emotionally demanding the next. They push you away, then pull you right back in again. And that brings us to the second core reason adult children like this struggle to let go. Convenience. It's easy to believe that once children grow up, they no longer need their parents. But in this dynamic, that is often not true. They still rely on what you represent. It might be practical support, a place to land when things fall apart. It might be emotional labor, you listening for hours while they unload their frustrations about everyone else. Or it may simply be appearances. They want to be able to say they are close to their mother or father, even while treating you poorly behind closed doors. To them, you're like a life raft, a backup generator, a tool they reach for when life gets hard, but not a person to love, honor, and cherish the way you deserve. It's heartbreaking, I know, especially after a lifetime of giving, especially when you still love your child and want the best for them. But understanding that they see the relationship as a convenience, not a connection, can help you make sense of the chaos. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine your adult child is like someone who refuses to fix the plumbing in their house. Instead of repairing it, they come to your home every time they need to take a shower. At first, you open the door with love. You're happy to help. That's what parents do. But months go by, years even, and they still haven't fixed their own plumbing. They just keep using yours. One day, you ask why they haven't tried to make repairs, and they snap at you. You're always judging me. You feel guilty. You let them in again, but nothing changes. That's how emotional convenience works. And sadly, many parents are caught in this cycle without realizing it. So if you've ever asked yourself, why does my child treat me this way? Why won't they stop? Why can't they just leave me alone if they hate me so much? Remember this. They need the fight. They need the convenience. And you've become their contrast and their comfort zone. But here's the silver lining, and it's a big one. You have more power than you think. And we're going to talk about that next. Because once you understand the game that's being played, you can step off the field. You can choose not to play the role they've written for you. And you can begin to rebuild your life with peace, strength, and dignity. You're not here to prop up anyone else's ego. You're here to enjoy your life, finally, fully, freely. And no one has the right to take that away from you, not even your own child. Let's keep going. Maybe you've spent years wondering if it's just a phase. You hope that one day they'd grow out of it, that they'd wake up and finally see how much you love them, how much you've done. But with an adult child who behaves this way, what you're dealing with isn't simple immaturity or a temporary rough patch. It's a pattern, a deeply self-focused way of relating to others that doesn't fade with age. In fact, it often becomes more entrenched over time. You may have tried everything. Apologizing, even when you didn't know what you did wrong. Trying to keep the peace. Avoiding certain topics just to stop the blow-ups. And yet, no matter how much you bend, they still find fault. They still lash out. They still make you feel like the problem. But let me tell you something that can change the entire way you see this dynamic. You hold more power than you think. That's right. The moment you stop chasing their approval and start recognizing your own worth, the balance begins to shift. Because what people who thrive on control and validation truly fear isn't being yelled at. It isn't being corrected. It's being ignored, being irrelevant, being left to face themselves without someone else to blame. And this is where we come to something I call the truth that reverses the power dynamic. For years, they may have convinced you that you're powerless, that you're wrong, that you're broken. They chip away at your confidence and your voice. But the reality is, they need you to stay small so they can feel big. They need you to keep doubting yourself so they can stay in control. When you begin to see that their behavior isn't about you, but about their need to prop themselves up, you start to gain clarity. And clarity is powerful. Picture this for a moment. Your child comes over already in a mood. You can feel it before they even speak. The sighs, the tone, the eye rolls. Maybe they make a passive-aggressive comment about how you always play the victim or never support them. In the past, that might have triggered you. You might have gotten defensive or sad or maybe tried to fix things. But now you pause. You remember, this isn't about you. This is about their need for conflict. Their need to feel superior. Their need for contrast. So you don't argue. You don't beg. You don't play the role they want. You simply observe. And in that moment, you take your power back. You see, A person who relies on control can't dominate someone who doesn't react. They can't manipulate someone who knows their own worth. And they can't hold on to someone who finally understands that love shouldn't hurt. Now, I know that for many of you watching, this might sound easier said than done. Maybe you've spent decades trying to keep the relationship together. Maybe you've sacrificed your health, your peace, even your finances, hoping that one day it would all pay off. But I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question. When is the last time you felt truly seen by your child? Truly appreciated? Not for what you gave, but for who you are. If you can't remember, that's not a relationship. That's a role you're playing in someone else's drama. And that brings us to something very important. What I call the 2 C's that govern toxic relationships. Contrast and convenience. These are the 2 forces that keep people locked into a relationship, even one they openly complain about or claim to resent. Contrast, as we talked about before, means they need someone to push against, someone to feel superior to. It's not about truth, it's about power. They paint you as the problem so they can feel like the solution. Convenience, on the other hand, is what makes it worth staying. You may not even realize how much they rely on you. Not just for rides, money, babysitting, or a place to crash, but for emotional convenience. You absorb their stress. You soften the fallout from their decisions. You give them someone to call when everything else falls apart. They may not show gratitude. They may act like they're doing you a favor by letting you stay in their life. But deep down, they know how much they lean on you. And that's why they hate you but can't let you go. Because if you leave, they lose both contrast and convenience. They lose their emotional punching bag. They lose their safety net. They lose the person who's always been there, no matter how badly they behaved. But here's the part I really want you to hear. You don't have to play that role anymore. You're allowed to step back. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to choose peace over chaos, love over obligation, and boundaries over guilt. It doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you wise. It makes you healthy. It makes you someone who has finally decided to stop being hurt in the name of family. Let me share something personal. I once spoke with a woman in her 70s. She had spent over 40 years trying to please a daughter who blamed her for everything. Nothing was ever enough. No gesture was right. No words were safe. She said to me, "I feel like I'm still parenting a teenager, but she's 45. Do you know what finally shifted everything for her? She stopped apologizing for existing. She stopped chasing approval and started reclaiming her time, her joy, and her dignity. She began gardening again. She joined a book club. She finally planned that trip she always put off. And for the first time in years, she said, 'I feel free.' That freedom is possible for you too. Even if you can't fully cut ties, even if you still have to see your child from time to time because of grandkids, shared finances, or family events, you can still shift the dynamic. You can still stop playing the role they expect. You can still say, no more. No more being blamed for their bad day. No more twisting yourself into knots to avoid upsetting them. No more letting guilt decide your boundaries. Because the truth is, the healthier you get, the more uncomfortable they'll become. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're no longer playing the part they want you to play. And that discomfort, that's their problem, not yours. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to rescue them from it. You're not here to be their contrast or their convenience. You're here to live your life fully and joyfully. And no matter how long you've been stuck in this toxic cycle, it's never too late to walk away from a role that was never yours to begin with. Let's keep going. There's something powerful that happens when you stop participating in someone else's narrative. When you stop being the one they lean on, blame, or use, and start becoming someone who chooses peace over drama. And for many parents of deeply self-absorbed children, that's the first real breath of fresh air in decades. Maybe you're feeling a little nervous right now. That's normal. The idea of stepping back from a child you love, even a child who's hurt you repeatedly, can stir up guilt, fear, and sadness. You're human. You're a parent. Of course you want to keep the door open. Of course you hope they'll change. But at the same time, something in you is probably whispering, I can't keep living like this. That whisper, that's your wisdom. That's your strength starting to come through. And when you really start listening to that voice inside you, something begins to shift. You stop reacting to their outbursts. You stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't interested in understanding. You stop showing up to arguments you never asked to be part of. And instead, you start living again. That could mean different things for different people. For one person, it might be finally spending more time with friends who bring joy and laughter, instead of criticism and conflict. For another, it could be finding a hobby that makes your heart feel full, whether that's art, volunteering, walking in nature, or just reading a book without feeling tense. For many, it's as simple as having peace in your home again. When you've spent years walking on eggshells, even just making a cup of tea in silence can feel revolutionary. So now we arrive at what may be the hardest but most important truth of all. The decision ultimately belongs to you. Not your child, not your family, not your church, not your neighbors. You. You decide how much access someone gets to your time, your energy, your heart. You decide what kind of behavior you allow in your life. You decide whether to keep trying to fix what you didn't break, or to put down the tools, step back, and breathe. You are not obligated to be mistreated just because you share DNA with someone. Being a parent doesn't mean being a doormat. And love, real love, doesn't have to come at the cost of your mental health or dignity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for them, is to let go. Now, letting go doesn't always mean going no contact. For some, that's the right choice. For others, it's not possible or not necessary. Letting go can mean different things. Emotionally detaching, setting firmer boundaries, refusing to engage in blame games, or simply choosing not to chase closeness that's never reciprocated. You still get to love your child in your own way. But that love doesn't have to be at your own expense. And it doesn't have to mean playing the same painful role you've been stuck in. You're allowed to say, I love you, and I'm stepping back. You're allowed to say, I care about you, but I will not accept this behavior. You're allowed to say nothing at all and simply move in a direction that feels calm and right for your life. Let me ask you this. If a friend treated you the way your adult child does, constantly criticizing, ignoring, controlling, how long would you have stayed in that friendship? The answer is usually, not long. So why do we tolerate so much from family? Because we're told we have to. Because we're conditioned to think that walking away is failure, that choosing ourselves is selfish, that blood is thicker than water, no matter how toxic it becomes. But I'm here to tell you, peace is thicker than guilt. Boundaries are thicker than obligation. And love, true love, is never cruel. If you've made it this far in the video, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are not alone. There are thousands, millions of parents just like you who've experienced this quiet heartbreak, who've given and given until there's nothing left, who have questioned themselves, blamed themselves, and carried a burden that was never theirs to begin with. You are not weak for being hurt. You are not mean for wanting peace. And you are not selfish for saying, enough. You've raised a child. You've lived through decades of responsibilities, challenges, and sacrifice. Now, this chapter, this next part of your life, gets to be for you. You don't need to stay stuck in guilt or confusion. You don't need to keep opening a door that only brings pain. You can choose a new path. One where you are no longer someone's emotional punching bag, but instead your own safe haven. And as you begin to shift the dynamic, you may be surprised by what happens. Maybe your child will resist. That's expected. Maybe they'll lash out, accuse you, try to pull you back into the same cycle. That's part of the pattern. But the more you hold steady, the more you protect your peace, the more their control begins to fade. Because they can only play the game if you keep showing up for it. And now you know, you don't have to. You are allowed to be free. You are allowed to be happy. You are allowed to be whole. So if no one has told you this in a while, you're doing better than you think. You're stronger than you know. And you deserve a life that is calm, kind, and full of people who actually care about you, not just people who need something from you. If this message resonates with you, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below, share your thoughts, your questions, or just say hello. You're part of a community here, a community that sees you, supports you, and understands exactly what you're going through. And if this video helped you in any way, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. We've got more heartfelt, healing conversations coming your way every week, and you don't want to miss them. You are not alone. You are not powerless. And you are not here to carry someone else's pain on your back forever. Here's to living your best life, at any age. Here's to choosing peace, to reclaiming your voice, and to walking into this next chapter with your head held high. You've earned it.